Hi everyone, my name is Viv, I'm from Academic Skills, and I've got a series of short videos for you about essay writing for Art History 1006. In this video we're going to talk about finding and developing your argument. So for your essay, the main requirement of your essay is that it has an argument. That's the main thing that ties your essay together. So it has to have an argument, and the reason for that is your argument is your answer to the question. It's based on the sources that you used, based on the ideas that you have, and based on your analysis of the works that you're looking at, the artworks that you're looking at, for instance. And your argument is your stance on a debate. So I'm going to take you through how you analyze your questions to find a relevant debate, and how you develop a question and an answer based on that. So with essay writing, it's useful to think of it as taking place in multiple stages. First of all, you have to spend a bit of time breaking down the question. And this can take a series of weeks, for instance. Essay writing is something that if you do it, the night before, you're not going to end up with a very good essay, and you're not going to have the time to develop the ideas in depth. So what you really want to aim to do is try and spread out your essay writing over at least a few weeks. Say, for instance, 3 or 4 weeks, if not a bit longer, because breaking down the question and mulling over what your thoughts are, finding relevant sources, analysing them, drafting up your essay, and then revising it can take a while. And really that process of thinking through the ideas over a series of days, weeks, and so on can help you to get better ideas in the long run. The other thing is that taking notes is really useful to do actively. So when you are preparing your essay, think about how you take notes, how you read and research to be able to analyse the topic that you have. So some research that's come out of another university, for instance, has found that the high achieving students are those who actually take active notes and have a strategy for how they go about doing that. So I'm going to talk you through that. So first of all, have a think about what your question is going to be. So looking at your essay questions, you might find 1 or 2 that really appeal to you, and that's a really good start. So having a topic that you're interested in is always helpful for writing an essay in the first place. There's lots of research to show that if you're writing an essay on a topic that you don't find interesting, you're going to find it more difficult. The other thing is that you've got to have a sense of, is there much to write about? So considering the essay question, have you done some research? Have you figured out whether there's a lot of research to use? And if you can't find anything, then maybe have a think about changing your searches, changing your search terms, or if it gets to the stage where you're thinking, well, I'm really interested in that other topic, don't be afraid of changing, just don't do it at the last minute. Give yourself at least a couple of weeks if you want to change your question. So when you do choose a question, first of all, identify those directional words. So they're the words that tell you what type of answer you're supposed to give. So are you supposed to analyze a piece of work? Are you supposed to analyze somebody's body of works? Are you supposed to examine? Are you supposed to put a case for or against in answer to a statement, for instance, and so on. All of these directional words, though, do mean that you have to have an argument. So even if it's a word like discuss or describe, you still have to take a position. And make sure that you also check the requirements very carefully. So for your art history essay, one of the main requirements is that you are supposed to demonstrate your research, your observation, and your analysis of pieces of work and the academic literature too. So it's going to be a mixture of sources that you're looking at. Make sure it's relevant to the course, and if you have any doubts, do ask your tutors and your lecturer. Also, make sure that you've got a bit of a balance between the iconographic and the visual analysis of works, as well as your academic analysis of secondary sources, for instance. So your argument has to be tight and informed. That means it has to be backed up by sources that you use. And you can focus on a few key works, key artistic works in depth to help you out to fit all of your ideas in. So in terms of directional words, let's for instance take this pretend question. So say for instance you've got this question: Rosalind Drexler's work has often been neglected in pop art exhibitions in favour of artists such as Warhol and Lichtenstein. Discuss Drexler's work and argue for or against whether it's distinctive as pop art. So you need to answer the question, basically, is Drexler's work distinctive as pop art or not? So you might have a think about, okay, well, I'm going to discuss it, but my ultimate aim is to make a case for or against whether Drexler's work is distinctive. Another useful thing to do is to identify the issue or the debate. So considering your question, have a look for what is the issue or what is the debate, the academic debate or the problem or the controversy that's related to it, because that will give you a sense of what kinds of arguments and counter arguments might exist around that question. And have a think about which ones are going to be relevant for your question. So for instance, in this question, there are a few debates actually. So one of them could be whether Drexler's work is as important as other pop artists. So you might have a case for or against whether it is as important. Another debate, and the one that we're going to concentrate on in these examples, is whether or not it's distinctive. So whether the pop art elements that Drexler uses are distinctive. So always look for those issues or those controversies in your questions to help you find out what kinds of arguments can you look for and what kinds of counter arguments might exist. So look for one or more sides of a debate. Then identify the information that you'll need to research. So considering your question, what kind of information will you need to look up? So for instance, for this question, you'd need to look up, well, first of all, what's Drexler's work like? What's the iconography that it uses? What's the visual elements and the techniques and the themes? But also, how is it similar or different to other examples of pop art? So looking at, for instance, the artists that the question is referring to, Warhol and Lichtenstein, have a think about, well, what makes Drexler's work different or similar to those people's works? And then what makes it distinctive? You know, what's distinguishing about Drexler's work? Is there anything that makes it distinctive or not? So these questions can help you, if you break them down, identify the arguments and the counter arguments about the question and have a look for the information based on those things. So that's the topic so far about breaking down the question. The next stage is about doing the research. So again, going back to the requirements, going back to your essay instructions, remember that you are being assessed on your ability to do the research, your ability to find relevant sources, and that your analysis not only includes your own iconographic and visual analysis, but also have a look for those secondary sources and do focus on a few key works in depth. So do make sure that you pick which artworks you're going to concentrate on. So your research and analysis might include a range of things. It might include books, journal articles, catalogues from exhibitions, artist statements, and things like that. The ANU Library has a LibGuide about how to find relevant art history and art and design resources. So they have really fantastic links to relevant journals, relevant exhibition catalogue sources, and so on. So keep that in mind. Do follow that link through. The other thing to think about is, do you need to find sources that are specifically answering your question? Now that's highly unlikely that you will ever find a source that actually answers the question that you're looking for. That's because sources are written for different purposes, they're answering different questions, and the question that you were asked might be a different one. So have a think about whether there are going to be other sources that still talk about the artist that you're working on, or the body of work that you're working on, or the period and so on, and have a think about gleaning the information from a variety of sources. So there might be sources where there's a section of it that's about the relevant art or artwork or period or historical situation that you're looking at. So have a think about the sources very carefully when you read through and think, is this going to be relevant? Is there a section of it that's going to be relevant? Use reading strategies to help you out there. So rather than start from the very beginning of an article or a book chapter or a book and start from the beginning and read through, that will actually take you a lot of time. So rather than do that, instead, first of all, figure out, what question do I want to ask right now? What's the question that I want to figure out from this reading? And then look for the answer to that question in that reading by, first of all, searching through. So just do a quick scroll through the article or scroll through the chapter and just have a look at, how is it presented? Is it divided up into different sections? Is it going to be easy to read? Are the sections relevant to your topic or not? Then have a skim through to get the sense of, what's the overall argument? So what's this author's argument? Are they making a case about Drexler's work, or are they talking more generally about pop art? So what's their argument there? Have a think about what's relevant to my piece of work, to my essay, and then choose the section that you want to look at, or choose the ideas that you want to focus on, and just take them one at a time. So you might choose one section and study that section in depth to find out the answer to that question. And then what you do is you go back and you reread it. So rather than reading it from start to finish, which would take hours to go through a journal article, if you do that, if you go from start to finish, then you're trying to understand absolutely everything in the article, and you're not going to be able to do that in just one close read through. So instead, what you need to do is isolate which questions you need to answer and read multiple times to answer those questions. That actually saves you a fair bit of time, and it helps you to concentrate really well as you go. So use those strategies. So first of all, just really scroll through the structure, see what it's like. That should only take you 20 seconds, 30 seconds. Then skim through the key parts, the abstract, the introduction, the conclusion, and just try and get a sense of what's the main idea here, and then choose which parts sound most relevant to me, and then study it. As you go, ask yourself questions to take relevant notes as well. The example that I've got here on the screen is of a note-taking template based on the Cornell note-taking method. The idea is that you break up your note-taking pages or Word document or whatever it is that you're using into different sections. One section for your ideas, one section for the author's ideas, and do a summary. So that summary might be at the bottom or the top of the page, but in that summary you need to have a think about, why are these ideas relevant to my essay? How is this going to help me to answer the question? And in the section on your ideas, try and ask yourself questions that will help you to follow up information later on. So, what evidence do they use? Why is this evidence relevant to my question? What do they say about Drexler's work? Do they say it's distinctive or not? Do I need to follow up on something? Do I agree? Do I disagree? Ask yourself those critical questions to help you plan out what you're going to say about this source for your essay as you go. Here's another example where you might do the note-taking, the Cornell note-taking method on a printed piece of paper, for instance, if you wanted to print off your journal articles. So again, use the margins in different ways. So use one side of the page for your notes about what the author says, the other side for what you think, and have a summary section. Once you've done a bit of reading, it's then time to start brainstorming your ideas, or mind mapping. So brainstorming is where you just put down all of the ideas on the page. Mind mapping is where you start to make connections between the ideas. So this is an example of a mind map where you might start to think about, okay, so Drexler's work, is it distinctive or not? That's your central question. And then you start to have a think about, well, based on all the readings that I've done, here are the key points that they keep on talking about. So they talk about other pop art themes, they talk about the effects on the viewer, whether that's distinctive, and that could be for pop art as a whole, or it could be for Drexler's work. You might put down a few extra notes on both of those. And you try and make connections between the ideas to help you to answer the question. Now, when you have a for or against question, so when you're being asked to make a case either for or against, you might actually do up a mind map which is a bit more like a table. Who says that Drexler's work is distinctive? Who says that it isn't distinctive? And put down your ideas about what the authors say there to try and map out, well, who falls on which side of the debate and what do I think? So that takes us to having done your research and having thought about the readings, thought about the research that you've come across, you've got to then start taking a position within the debate. So you've got to start figuring out what's your answer. And it's better to do that before you actually start writing than if you leave it a bit too late. Like if you think, okay, I'm just going to write down some ideas first and then I'm going to find my argument, that might end up being a little bit muddled. Whereas if you take a bit of time to reflect on, well, what's my answer? What's my position to the question? And try and summarize it first of all. That can help you to figure out what you need to be able to answer the question, how to plan your essay, for instance. So when you decide on your position, think about what's my answer to the question. So if this is the question, then what are my options for possible answers? So I could argue that Drexel's work is distinctive because of certain reasons. I could answer that it's not distinctive. I could say it's a little bit of both. It's, while it does have some distinctive elements or qualities, overall it's not distinctive because she follows many other conventions of pop art. Or I could do the opposite. I could say, well, yes, on the one hand, it does have generic elements of pop art, but actually Drexel's work is still very distinctive because of, and so on. So that process of finding a position will help you to then come up with a thesis statement. And that's what we're going to talk about in the next video.